understanding of the national holiday of Thanksgiving. Get your turkey, your cranberry sauce, and your stuffing, and let's begin.
What's up, Devon?
Hey, Nick. How you been, man?
Oh, it makes it. I don't know if anyone's gonna notice, but I have a mask on, and it might sound now that you probably now. I bet you if I wouldn't have said that, no one would have even noticed. But now that I said that, it's just going to be a prevalent thing. So I have a mask on because I got sick last week, and I'm feeling a lot better now. But as per rules and regulations go, I should be wearing a mask until day something. So here we are. It's been a good long while since we recorded our last episode.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time, a huge amount of time making reels and other advertisements and posts for the podcast.
There's so much in the background that goes along with keeping this thing afloat, and you've been doing a really good job.
Thank you,
honestly, keeping this thing going. I've just been kind of sitting back and. Honestly, dude, you run this thing now. I'm here at the podcast room, just kind of chilling, and then you're just kind of here working. So, props, man. It's been a good year.
Yeah, but I think it was your idea to do a holiday special because it's Thanksgiving. If we make one that's specifically about Thanksgiving, you'll get lots of views. Lots of people will take interest in this podcast, and
I mean, even though you're a history podcast and. Like, really, I almost feel like as a history podcast, as a history teacher for you, you almost have like not an obligation, but it's like, this is a very appropriate episode for a podcast like this. Whereas with someone else who has like an entertainment podcast, like, there's really no reason to do it.
Yeah,
there's really no
I'm
reason.
Not sure what you'd have to say about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm sure we can make something work, but this is very appropriate, so... thanks for being willing to do this, and I honestly am a little in the dark. I've been, I grew up in the American education system, so my idea of Thanksgiving up until I was an adult was, it was just a happy, a happy meeting between the natives and the pilgrims.
That's not what happened.
And turkey.
Or that's not what it eventually turned into.
Or if you want to watch the Addams, have you ever seen the Addams Family, where Wednesday Addams does her skit on Thanksgiving?
I don't think I've seen that. But I'm guessing she didn't have very much many good
things. She didn't have many good things. All right, well, Devon, let's just get into it. Why do we celebrate Thanksgiving? What's it all about? And what even was the first Thanksgiving that started the tradition?
Yeah, so Thanksgiving is an American holiday. It's basically exclusively American. Like, you're not going to go out to France or Germany or Mexico or somewhere in Asia and find Thanksgiving, unless you're near a U.S. military base, because I think in some parts of Australia, that's where there are some American bases. They actually do celebrate Thanksgiving because, contact with the military personnel just kind of, there's this cross-pollination of different traditions, and I think they celebrate some form of Thanksgiving too. But outside of that, it's very American. The reason is it's rooted in the very, very early history of Anglo-America, going all the way back to the 1590s. That's when the English Empire started sending colonists out across the Atlantic to the New World.
Just a little side note: that's not even 100 years after the Spaniards came, right?
I think that's roughly 100 years after them. Just above 100 years.
Wow. Okay. Oh yeah, 1492, right?
Yeah, it was from 1492, and it was into the 1590s that the first English colonists start showing up. Okay. I think the reason for that could be that the Spanish were just much more. I think they're just much more invested in taking as much land as they could in the New World. I think they actually claimed this ridiculous amount of land that they couldn't even control themselves, just because the transportation wasn't back then what it is today. So getting from Florida to the Dakotas is a bit harder back when the days before steam power.
That's a trek
or
now.
Cars or airplanes. Yeah, so I think they've. I'm guessing the listeners have probably heard about the lost colony of Roanoke. That was their first attempt to set up a colony, and it completely failed because after the colonial authorities came back after leaving the colony, they found that no one was there, and everyone had just gone missing. And even to this day, it's still a mystery as to what happened to them.
When was that?
I think that was in. Hold on, when was that?
So that was before the 1590s, I'm sure, right?
I think that was during the 1590s.
And the reason that it piques my interest is because I've heard, I don't even know, it's all a blur, but I heard that there were like stories from like either English colonizers or whatever that said that they would show up and Native Americans spoke better English than they did, or like they already spoke English.
Yeah, that was Tisquantum, also known as Squantum. And I looked it up, and it was in 1587, so that's actually even earlier than I originally thought. But yeah, they tried to send settlers to set up a colony, but it completely failed. All the colonists disappeared, and even today, 500, well, maybe not a full 500, but over 400 years later, it's still a mystery as to what happened to them.
Wow.
I think it's believed that they had to flee because their camp was attacked. Either that, or they just joined another Native American tribe because the Native Americans were much more accepting of them than the colonists were of the natives. It's also thought that some type of disease outbreak actually just forced them to flee or just killed off so many of them that their whole colony just fell apart.
So this is the lost colony of Roanoke,
Yeah.
you said? Okay, wow, interesting. Because Roanoke's an actual place now, though, in North Carolina, right? Or South Carolina?
Yeah, I think it's been resettled since the 1590s, but the original colony is kind of this lost disaster, and we still don't know conclusively what happened to them.
So, so then can you explain to me the background of why the English colonists were even there in the first place? Like why did they come to North America?
Yeah, so the reason is I think I just said the Spanish showed up in 1492 and they started taking up land in the New World. But then news started going back to Europe, and I think it took a century because there are other issues for the other powers. I think they had trouble funding expeditions at the same time as the Spanish. And I think it was also because the Spanish were trying to keep a lid on all the information that was getting out because they wanted a monopoly on the on this new territory. But then the English did eventually start setting up their colonies. They just went about it in a slightly different way. Like they had companies to fund the expeditions.
Is that akin to Pirates of the Caribbean, the East India Trading Company? That was a real company, though, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, they were. I don't think they were around at this point in time at this early stage.
But
in the 1600s, it was more the Dutch East India Company.
Oh, okay, but it was so it wasn't. These weren't colonists acting on behalf of a kingdom. These were like private organization or private companies essentially being hired to go and do this stuff.
Yeah, and
That's
once they were
wild.
out, while they got funding from the government, a lot of this was really just their own accord. They were the ones making these decisions in the name of making profits.
So that's just no different than like the SpaceX colonized Mars shirts.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I think you could also compare it to these like private military companies like Blackwater today, because that's kind of what they do.
There you go.
You know, they don't work. They're not government employees, but they do work for the government. They get paid for the government, and they do all types of dirty work on behalf of the government. But they also do it for their own profit too. So it's that kind of setup.
Same stuff's been going on for a very long time.
As
Then.
it has.
Okay, cool.
So in 1607, the English found Jamestown, that's under the Virginia Company of London, and the intention was to take over and exploit the local Powhatan people and force them to dig up the gold, which, unfortunately for them, there was no gold to be had, so that didn't go very well for them. But the first Thanksgiving wasn't in Jamestown; it was actually in Plymouth. That's up north in Massachusetts. There were a group of Puritans that was this radical religious group in Europe. They actually weren't fleeing from persecution. It was actually the reverse. They were fleeing from tolerance because they're afraid that their children would grow up in a tolerant environment in the Netherlands, and that it would corrupt them and make them soft. And they didn't want that. So they would rather travel across the Atlantic than risk their children eventually leaving and becoming more moderate.
So the Pilgrims is not the same as like English settlers. Like the Pilgrims were a specific group of people.
They were a specific subset of radical Puritans.
Yeah, so
who were considered radical.
Weren't
even
taught.
by the-
I don't remember, but I don't believe I was taught that in elementary school. Like you're just taught like, oh, every English. My idea of a pilgrim was every white English person that came over from Europe at that time.
No, many of them really weren't. Many of them were just there to make money. Some of them, I think, were actually criminals from England who were just getting deported out to the colonies because they're creating too many problems inside Britain itself.
Wow, all right.
So, yeah. Also, keep in mind, the Pilgrims were considered extreme even by the standards of their time. Even back in the 1600s, they were considered crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, but of course, they were farming on a completely new continent, so they didn't know how to survive, and they started starving. And the local people, known as the Wampanoag in that part of the New World, actually took pity on them, and they invited them to this feast. which, by the way, didn't even have that much turkey because they actually didn't have much beef or beef because they didn't bring that many cows.
Oh, they ended up having beef, all right.
But they did have a lot of poultry. Like they had ducks, they had goose, they had swans. They also had venison too because of course they did. That's there are lots of deer in that area still.
Wait, so we know that the original feast occurred in 1621 in November. Was it? Do we know around what time of the year?
Yeah, it was November. It's just I'll get to when the dates are later because as you'll see over time, it actually changes at what time during November it's supposed to be celebrated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that actually doesn't stay constant.
Okay.
And that gets into the next part on how did Thanksgiving become a national event?
Yeah,
because after the original 1621 feast, it had been celebrated unofficially. Though I think that was also because there was no United States of America yet. The country still wasn't independent.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1777, that's during the American Revolutionary War, the Continental Congress actually declared a specific official Thanksgiving Day celebration. But even then, it didn't become a national holiday. And I suppose that might be because they still weren't officially independent from Britain. They claimed independence, but it wasn't recognized by anyone yet.
Those colonies. What was the first colony, by the way? First English colony in America.
I think that would have to be Jamestown.
Jamestown.
Yeah.
So like Boston, New York, all these like major cities weren't even a thing at that time, were they? Or maybe they were.
Yeah, they were. They come later.
Wow.
Especially others like Philadelphia that come much later. New York City. That's actually no. I think New York City was actually around before, but it wasn't owned by the English. It was owned by the Dutch.
Yeah, it's just wild to think about like a time before that existed.
Fun fact: the current flag of New York is actually based on the older Dutch flag. Even though
really?
Very few people in New York today are actually of Dutch descent.
I don't even know what the New York State flag looks like.
Yeah, it's an orange, blue, and white tricolor type flag.
I have never seen this flag. I'm looking at it right now on Google. Wait, are you talking about this one right here? This is with these two people on it, and then the bird right there. New York State flag.
I mean the flag of New York City.
Oh, my bad.
Because New York City, well, before then it was called New Amsterdam. It was run by the Dutch.
Oh, wow.
But eventually the English took it from them since they just had more settlers to populate the land. That's actually also why France actually had to give up their colonies in Canada too.
I didn't even know New York had a flag.
Yeah, I think every city I think has some type of flag.
What's the Los Angeles flag? Really? Why am I not? Okay, you know what, dude? I'm just gonna not say anything before I get exposed for. Anyways, so apparently I don't know flags. Got a little sidetracked there. So in 1777, there was the official Thanksgiving Day celebration that you said was declared by the Continental Congress, but it wasn't actually a national holiday yet.
Yeah, it only became one in the 1800s.
Okay.
Now, there was an activist. Her name was Sarah Josepha Hale, and she wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb. She's actually the one who wrote that song. And she kept campaigning over decades, from the 1830s, I think, all the way into the 1870s, for Thanksgiving to become a unifying holiday. And the reason is because America was getting more divided over the issue of slavery. There were abolitionists who wanted to get rid of it, all of it, or at the very least stop the spread of slavery into their states, because there were free states in the north and there were slave states in the south, and there was all this empty territory. Well, not empty. There were still native people living there, but they hadn't been claimed and populated by American citizens.
It's like in the West,
so
right?
it was still kind of up in the air over whether they would become free states or whether they'd become slave states. That was probably the most pressing issue of that time.
Yeah.
And seeing this, she wanted to avoid a civil war, which didn't happen because there were much larger factors going on, much larger economic and social factors that eventually led to the bloodiest war in American history, even more so than World War II, believe it or not.
Wow, really?
Especially for civilians. They suffered pretty horribly during the Civil War.
That's scary.
So during the war, and that's in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln actually designated November 26th as Thanksgiving Day.
Okay.
So that's one designation for the...
So that's our first iteration of it being, or say it's our second maybe.
But as it turns out, so this has been credited to Sarah Josepha Hale because she's been writing letters to many different presidents over the decades to make Thanksgiving a national holiday to unite the country. We think that he may have listened to her and decided to do that, but Lincoln had already declared multiple Thanksgivings before that he even got that letter.
Okay.
He had declared one in 1862 and another in 1863 to celebrate the victories in Gettysburg.
And he called them Thanksgivings.
Yeah, he called them Thanksgiving.
Wow. Okay.
But I should really turn off my phone before I start
It's all good.
Start these recordings.
Well, yeah, you just took us back to 2024 for a second.
Yeah, so before then, I think I mentioned the holiday had to be redeclared every single year by whichever president was in office. But after the Civil War, they put an end to that because the then president Ulysses S. Grant, he was a former Union general, made Thanksgiving a federal holiday, along with New Year's Day, Christmas, and the 4th of July. So all of these 4 big holidays all come out of the post-Civil War era in the late 19th century.
Was Ulysses Grant the statue that got torn down within the last 10 years in the South somewhere?
I don't think so.
Was he a Southern leader? Or, he was a Southern leader, right?
Ulysses S. Grant was a Union general. He was on Abraham Lincoln's side.
Oh, my bad.
So I don't think his statue would have been torn down. It's really mostly
I'm thinking of
Confederates.
I think it was
ones
Robert E. Lee.
or,
There we go,
what's
Robert E.
his
Lee.
name, Jefferson Davis and those other guys who are
Some of
in
those other
charge of
guys.
the Confederacy.
Okay, cool. Never
Yeah.
mind.
But then it changes again since in 1939. So this is just leading up to World War II, and it's still during the Great Depression. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually moved Thanksgiving to the second Thursday of November.
Okay.
And the reason he does this is because he wanted to finish Thanksgiving quicker in order to extend the Christmas shopping season, because he knew that Americans wouldn't start their Christmas shopping until after Thanksgiving. But if Thanksgiving is right before the beginning of December, well, then that shortens the amount of time that all the businesses can prepare for Christmas. And he wanted to give them as much time to sell everything as possible and boost the economy, which was still a bit controversial at the time because he was meddling with the national holiday in order to improve the economy.
Franksgiving.
Yeah, and it was called Franksgiving. So it went on in 1939, but then in 1942, they ruled that Thanksgiving was the 4th Thursday of November, and it stayed that way ever since.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. My birthday's on November 30th, and I feel like maybe Thanksgiving's landed on my birthday once. I don't know. Anyways, side note. So that's where we got the 4th Thursday. Cool.
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't set in stone from the very beginning, and it has changed over time. And who knows, maybe it'll change again sometime in the future.
Okay, cool. So then, looking at it from a little more of a modern perspective, how can we interpret it? How can we interpret Thanksgiving in today's realm, right? And how can we, we are the World History Addicts podcast. We do not shy away from talking about the little more uglier side of things, the things that maybe aren't going to be spoken of, and then the mainstream narrative about stuff. So
yeah, definitely not from the public school system.
How would someone with a more critical eye on Thanksgiving perceive it, right? And where do the Native American people get factored into this?
Exactly. Since the 1970s, there have been anti-Thanksgiving celebrations, and some of them are called unthanksgivings, and also the Day of Mourning. And these have been held by Native American groups or other groups who are sympathetic to what happened to them. It's kind of like Columbus Day, and that's been reimagined as an anti-colonial holiday.
Indigenous Peoples Day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it is. It's kind of a reclaiming of the holiday to see the other side of it. And there are plenty of criticisms to be made about how Thanksgiving is a form of national propaganda. I mean, just look at how FDR moved the date to boost Christmas sales.
Yeah,
which I think made sense at the time, but it was still a very cynical kind of move to do that to the holiday. And it's also been used to unite the country, even at a time when I think the country really shouldn't have been united around slavery. It should have been united around emancipation. And the Civil War was never going to be stopped just because of a national holiday. And it's also been used to obscure the ugly side of Native American genocide and treachery by the U.S. government, like during the Trail of Tears. So what we can take away from that is that Thanksgiving is a complex holiday. But we can also view it as something more than just a facade to cover genocide and war crimes and treachery, or as this just kind of nebulous season to be grateful. We can also view it as a time where two different groups got together across racial lines and actually managed to get along. That's something to look back upon.
Yeah, man. No, I have my great grandfather was born on an Apache reservation, so I definitely have Native American blood in me. growing up though, it wasn't even about. I'm pretty sure this is probably the common experience for a lot of just us regular people is you don't even really care about the historical implications. You just kind of go because you kind of are going to hang out with your family. You're going to go. It's an excuse to go eat, and be together with your family. At least that's what it was for me growing up. And now, having, I guess learned a lot about how the real history is unfolded. This is helpful for me because I was even a little confused. Like, okay, well then, like, was there an actual bad thing that happened on the original Thanksgiving, or like it all just kind of gets lumped into a topic, like you said, and so these un-Thanksgiving celebrations aren't necessarily pointing at any particular day in the history or pointing at any particular event. It's more so looking at the bigger picture of it. That hey, we shouldn't be as ignorant as about this general holiday, right? As we've been, I guess it's more so they're protesting the concept of colonization as a whole by doing these things.
Yes,
right?
I think they're also protesting how this one positive event has been used as a kind of a mask for these many other negative events that followed afterwards.
There you go.
So
yeah.
that I think is why there's so much of a controversy over Thanksgiving and how it's presented. And from a more radical lens, you can also view it as a time back in the first Thanksgiving where most of America hadn't been taken away. It hadn't been colonized, and most Americans were brown at that point. So yeah, you can also view it as not just be grateful, but make America brown again.
Yeah, it's so wild to even what a concept. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tripping, but to try and conceive America pre this, right? The America that was
pre-colonization.
Yeah, and even just like agricultural people not living in cities, people living as hunter-gatherers, all the animals that are near extinct and endangered now that existed back then and stuff like that. It's hard to picture it in your head, That being said, it's a little sad, but what conclusions can we draw away from this holiday in general?
We can draw away that Thanksgiving is a complex holiday. It's an American holiday, but it's also an evolving tradition because it changes pretty drastically over the 4 centuries of American history where it's been celebrated. Yeah. Sometimes that's been because they wanted to They wanted to shift when it was being celebrated for cynical reasons. Other times it was designated to be a different way to bring the country together.
Mm-hmm.
It also allows us to reflect on how the most powerful country in the world, which is the USA, for the time being. We don't know if that'll be true in the future. But there was actually once a time when it was a handful of settlers, and they needed help from local tribes just to survive. If it hadn't been for those tribes, they likely wouldn't have survived. Many of us wouldn't be here, and America probably wouldn't either. The holiday is also a prime example of cultural myth-making, because while some of the aspects of it, like that of Lincoln, Grant, or FDR were done deliberately as a way of trying to control the narrative. Parts of it, like Turkey, I think appeared organically because it's an evolving tradition, and it's something that people just participate in and add their own ideas to, and it just grows into something else. And it also makes you wonder, because do you think it's possible that in the future we'll have other holidays that don't currently exist today? Like maybe there will be a different kind of Thanksgiving for, refugees from Central America coming to America and being greeted by local volunteers who give them food or something, and that memory has just become so powerful that in maybe 100 years that becomes like the new founding myth.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, we live in a country that's very volatile right now, and everything's changing, and it's a very interesting time to be alive. And I think when we're gone in 100 years, 200 years, people will hopefully be able to look back at this time and still be able to put the pieces together. And hopefully we didn't unleash all of the said nuclear weapons. That would be very sad. But I think on that point, I think we definitely will look back. I mean, like, we already look back at 9/11 as a phenomenon, and it's not necessarily a holiday, but it is.
Yeah, it's a cultural memory now.
But even its implications that we've talked about, where it's a turning point for America, it signifies the end of a golden era almost, right? Or maybe it was already declining at that point, but for me, it's like 9/11 signifies the turning of a page to where we are now. That's where we essentially, that's what began where we are now. in terms of like our involvement in the Middle East and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was only 4 years old when 9/11 went down, and like even back then, I knew something horrible was going on. I just didn't know what it was. Everyone just seemed really tense around me.
So yeah, I think there will be other holidays with significance of Thanksgiving. And by all of this, maybe so you're telling me my main takeaway is so it wasn't just they didn't just get together one day and had turkey and stuffing and
Yeah,
green
I
beans.
don't think there was much turkey on or green beans on the first or the original Thanksgiving. There was a lot more poultry, like ducks and geese and venison.
I am all right. Well, on that note,
yeah,
thanks, Devin.
Yeah, and with how immigration is going and how the birth rates are changing, who knows? Maybe one day America will resemble the land that it once was before the English arrived. So, MABA, make America brown again.
Man. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you guys for listening. You did mention some other. You did make a little callback to talking about how America might not be the unipolar power.
Exactly.
So that's an episode 1 throwback. So be sure to check out the episodes. Thank you very much, Devin. Hope you all have a very, very happy Thanksgiving with your families.
Thank you, Nick.
Enjoy your time, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for checking out this special holiday episode of World History Addicts.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you for listening to the World History Addicts podcast. You can follow us at the World History Addicts podcast Instagram page for new episodes and news. We hope to have you again, and have a great day.